Hi, everybody. Like Doug said, my name's Ian. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming out. If I haven't met you before, please come on up. Say hi afterwards. I'd like to get to know you. But does anybody know what today is? Christmas. It is the first day of winter. And I'm going to say something controversial, which I don't know if that's the best way to start a teaching by saying something controversial, but I'm going to do it anyway. Winter is the best season. I know. I hear it. I see it. I hear your grimaces. I see it in your face. You disagree. And that's okay. Every time that you have to go scrape snow off your car, I give you permission to curse my name. But ultimately, what I love about winter so much is snow. I just love the snow. Snow turns me into a child. Literally, I woke up this morning and I opened the curtains in my bedroom and I looked outside and I literally gasped. You know, most people when they retire, they want to retire south so that they can get away from the snow. I want to retire north. I want apocalyptic levels of snow. I want a snowmobile to be my primary mode of transportation. Move to Buffalo, yeah. Just look at this. And this is why I love snow. It's just so beautiful. And I try to find pictures of snow, and I realize they pretty much all have my dog in them because he's my primary snow companion, him and my wife. But snow is just really no other way to say it. It's just pretty. I just like to stand in the calmness of the snow. Okay, so yeah, it sucks to drive in snow. I know when I said I love the winter, everyone's like, have you ever driven in this stuff? Yes, I've driven in it. I scraped my car off. But my counter question to you, have you ever just stood in a field or in your backyard after a heavy snow, especially at night and there's no clouds and everything is just brighter and the moon is just reflecting off the snow and everything is so calm and still and quiet? Or have you ever gone into the woods after such a heavy snow that it weighs down the branches of the tree and it just absorbs all the sound and you can just hear a pin drop? That's what I love about the snow, just the calmness and the stillness of the snow. And snow has this capability, this hold in my life that whenever I could be super busy, I can have everything that I need to do in the world, but if it's snowing outside, I'm stopping everything and I'm going to go frolic in the snow. I'm just going to go sit in the stillness of the snow. The snow has this ability to just help to make me put my life on pause, and just go enjoy its beauty. And that's precisely how it is and how it should be with the Lord. So often we are just so crazy busy with all the things that we have to do. And even from a ministry perspective, we're thinking about all the ministry that we have to do, the places that we have to go, the meetings that we have to make, that we fail to just put our chaotic ministry lives on hold and just behold the beauty and the stillness of the Lord. Consider what Paul says here in 2 Corinthians 3:18. And we all who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory are being transformed into his image with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. I love this word contemplate, and there's a bunch of different translations for this. This is the NIV. It says contemplate. Some say beholding. Some say reflecting. Reflecting as in a mirror. Some translations literally say reflecting as in a mirror. The point of that really being you're intensely staring at a mirror. But ultimately, what this is getting at is this idea of just gazing deeply at the Lord's glory. Just looking at the Lord's glory. Just spending time where I am seated, looking, gazing, contemplating the Lord's glory. Leading up to this verse here in 2 Corinthians 3, Paul has been using Moses as an illustration. And he tells the story, or he's referring to a story where Moses would climb Mount Sinai, and at the top of Mount Sinai was the presence of God, and he would hang out with God and spend time with God and get the law. And then he would walk down the mountain. You remember what would happen to Moses' face when he would come down the mountain? His face would be glowing. He would be in the presence of God, and he would descend the mountain, and his face would be glowing. But his face would glow so brightly that it scared people. So he would have to put a veil over his face because people were intimidated or scared of Moses' shining face. This is Exodus 34. As Moses descended from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand as he descended the mountain, he did not realize that the skin of his face shone as a result of his speaking with the Lord. When Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses, the skin of his face shone. They were afraid to come near him. When Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil over his face. But whenever Moses went to the Lord to speak with him, he would remove the veil until he came out. And the Israelites would see that Moses' face was radiant. Then Moses would put the veil over his face again until he went to speak to the Lord. I'll unpack this idea of the veil a little bit later, but here in Exodus 34, Moses would go just spend time with the Lord in the presence of the glory of the Lord, and it would literally transform his face. And after being in union, being one-on-one, face-to-face with the Lord, he would be radiant and glowing. And the thing about this is you knew that Moses was spending time with the Lord, right? If you saw Moses and his face was glowing, you could hazard a guess at what Moses was just doing. Like, oh, Moses must have been hanging out with the Lord because his face is glowing again, right? And here's the point. Being in the presence of God transforms us so that we radiate his light to the people around us. Being in the presence of the Lord transforms us so that we are radiating his light. And we want to be that type of person, don't we? You want to be the type of person who it's like, I can tell that this guy has been in the presence of the Lord. He just radiates glory. He just radiates something special. I can tell that this guy has had some face time with the Lord, that he's just been one-on-one communing, that he's been beholding the glory of the Lord. And I keep using this word glory. I've used it probably 50 times. I think I'll use it about 1,000 more. And it is a massive word in the Bible. And it's one that I wish I had the time. I mean, you can do multiple teachings and studies on the word itself, glory. But I'll try and summarize it. The word glory in the Old Testament, the word kavod, I think it is in Hebrew, literally translates to heavy or weighty. So an object could have mass, but also a topic could be weighty, right? You know, if an object has a lot of mass to it, what do we say? We say that's heavy. But if you're having a conversation and it's a really intense conversation about a deep topic, what do you say about that conversation? That was heavy. You see? You see the point there? In the New Testament, the Greek word that's used for glory would be used or directly translated for reputation or opinion, right? So if you kind of put all this together, it's this reputation or perception of someone or something that is weighty, that has significance, that has mass to it. So when the Psalms say and Scriptures say that the heavens declare the glory of the Lord, they're pointing to, the heavens point to the weight and significance of God. Now, Paul is saying in 2 Corinthians 3 that we, with unveiled faces, have direct access to the glory of God. And this is surprising because it hasn't always been like this. The verses leading up to 3:18, this is what Paul says. Therefore, since we have such a hope, we are very bold. We are not like Moses, who would put a veil over his face to prevent the Israelites from seeing the end of what was passing away, but their minds were made dull. For to this day, the same veil remains when the old covenant is read. It has not been removed because only in Christ is it taken away. Even to this day, when Moses is read, a veil covers their hearts. But whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. So here in 2 Corinthians 3, Paul is kind of doing a little mini teaching on Exodus 34, right? How Moses would spend time with the Lord, and there would be this veil covering his face after he would descend because it was just shining, his face was shining so much. And then he would leave and put it back on. But he's getting to this point of this veil covering or hiding the glory of God. Now, the thing with Moses is everything about that story was temporary. Moses had temporary access to God. He would walk up the mountain and spend time with God, or later with the tabernacle, he would enter the tabernacle and spend time with God, and then he would leave. So his access was temporary. Also, the radiance of his face was temporary. He would leave, and then over time, the shine, the radiance of Moses' face, the glory that he was reflecting would fade too. And Paul is saying that what we have is permanent. We have permanent access to the glory of the Lord. And he also says that not just that we are growing in glory. And these two ideas of the glory of the Lord and the veil, in the Old Testament, they go hand in hand, right? Think about the temple, the Holy of Holies inside the temple. That was like the hot spot of God's presence. And you couldn't just walk into the Holy of Holies. You couldn't just walk into the presence of God. You couldn't just come face to face with the glory of the Lord, because you had to do it at a certain time. You had to be a certain type of person. You had to be a high priest. You had to go through these rituals. You had to cleanse yourself. Then through all of this, you had temporary access to the glory of the Lord. If you just, any other random person at any other point in time in the day, try to walk into the Holy of Holies, what would happen? You'd die. You would just die. You would keel over and die, because that's God's presence. God's presence is so strong and so profound that you can't just be in God's presence. He is perfect. He is filled with glory, but we are broken. We're sinners. So in the temple, they would have a veil that would separate the Holy of Holies, God's presence, from everything else. In other words, the glory of God was not directly accessible. But then Jesus Christ came in human form, and God's glory dwelt among us. In John 1:14, the Word became flesh, and we observed his glory. So in the Old Testament, what used to be stationary or limited, inaccessible, now through Jesus was walking and talking and eating with people and hugging people and healing people and touching them. And to push this even further, through Jesus Christ's death, Paul says the veil has been removed, and now, where does the glory of God live? In you, in your heart. So again, what used to be inaccessible is now living inside your heart. The glory of God is living in you. Consider what Paul says in 1 Cor 3. Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? Do you not know that you are God's temple? That is a mind-blowing consideration. If we think through history, through the Old Testament, that you are the temple of God, that God's glory lives in you, that the veil has been removed, that we can see God's glory for all that it is, that we don't have to fear God's glory, that we don't have to perform a set of rituals, that we don't have to wait till a certain time of year, we don't have to be a certain type of person. We have unlimited, intimate access to the glory of the Lord. Why? Because it's in your heart, because it's there in you. And if you're visiting here tonight, I want you to walk away knowing this, that you have unrestricted access to the Lord. You can have unrestricted access to him. God is not distant. God is not unapproachable. But in fact, you can approach him here tonight. The vision of God for so many people is obscured through this idea that we have to appease him, that we have to do the right things or the right types of things or be a good person. If that's your view, if your perception of God is that you have to earn your way into his presence, then you have a veiled view of who God is. You cannot earn your way into the presence of God. The only thing you can do is ask Jesus Christ to remove the veil. And that's what Jesus came here to do. Jesus Christ came here, died on the cross, and rose 3 days later to remove any barriers that stand between us and God. All you have to do is turn to him and ask him to remove the veil from your heart. But now, we live in the midst of this profound reality where, as a Christian, the glory of God lives in your heart, that you are a temple of the living God. And here's my question that I'm pulling from 2 Corinthians 3:18. How often do you contemplate that? Put it another way. How often do you access the temple in your heart? And notice the language here he says that we are being transformed. Not that we are transforming ourselves, but we are being transformed. God is the one who's transforming us. A result of contemplating and beholding the glory of the Lord in the ministry of the Spirit is we are being transformed into the image of God. And I don't want us to miss this point because we think that transformation is a byproduct of something that we do. I have to act or do certain things in order to be transformed. I have to perform in a certain way or do these certain duties in ministry. That's what leads to my transformation. But if we just rush and do all the things that we think lead to our transformation without first contemplating the glory of the Lord, we will get burnt out. That's a recipe for disaster. Dallas Willard says, the first and most basic thing we can and must do is to keep God before our minds. This is the fundamental secret of caring for our souls. Contemplating the Lord's glory is the fundamental secret to caring for our souls. I want to ask you something. I want to ask you an odd question. Maybe you've never been asked this before. How is your soul? How is your soul doing tonight? I want you to think about it. Are you tired? Are you burnt out? Does your soul need cared for? A lot of people in our fellowship have come to a lot of realizations recently. And one that I think a lot of people, myself included, have had is that we have focused too much on what we have to do, where you have to go, the meetings, the classes, and we have felt this pull of performance, of doing things. So the first realization that a lot of us have had is, wait a minute, I've been focusing a lot on doing. The second realization you've probably had, I'm tired. Right? I'm tired. How do we nourish our souls? How do we care for our souls? I want to talk about two different ways. One, in the context of community. And then one, how we can do this individually. From a communal perspective, from a fellowship perspective, I want to flip to John 17. And John 17 is a beautiful prayer from Jesus where he starts by praying about his disciples. But then he extends his prayer past his disciples and he prays about us. Believe it or not, he's praying about us. He says, I prayed not only for these meaning his disciples, but also for those who believe in me through their word. I have given them the glory you have given me, so that they may be one as we are one. I am in them and you are in me, so that they may be completely one. That the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them as you have loved me. So we see, first of all, that Jesus has been given this glory. And that's easy to think about. Of course, there's glory associated with Jesus. He's part of the triune God. But do you ever think of yourself as glorious? Jesus says that he has given that glory to us. Do you think of yourself as glorious? Because Jesus does. And there's this connection here between God's love and God's glory and our unity. And that caring for our souls and contemplating God's glory is something that can happen in the context of our community, of us spending time together. I know many of us have been healing and processing a lot of things, and for me, a lot of this has been individual, but a lot of it has also been in community. First of all and foremost, healing with my wife together. Healing with friends. Last weekend, we had the trauma workshop. That was a great opportunity to heal with community there. But what I want us to consider and think is when we get together, are we caring for one another's souls by beholding the glory of the Lord? Or does it feel like just a business meeting with an agenda that just zaps the life out of the room. Really, what I'm asking is, when we get together, are we worshiping the Lord? Are we reflecting on the work of Jesus Christ, of his glory, of praising him? That is nourishing. Focusing on the Lord and what he has done, that is nourishing. When we come together, let it not be because we feel obligated to, or when we do, let's not focus on all the things that we feel like we have to do, but let's gaze and contemplate the glory of the Lord. When we get together, whatever context it is it soul nourishing? Is it life-giving? Or is it draining and tiresome? And I also want to address the people who maybe you walk into a meeting, central teaching or home church or what have you, and you think, I don't even know why I'm going. I have nothing to offer. That's not true. You have the glory of the Lord to offer. You are glorious. You are bringing God's presence into the room simply by being there. But outside of, time together, what about my personal life? When am I going to find the time to behold the glory of the Lord? We have jobs, right? Many of us have jobs. You have kids. You have to get up early, and you have to get your kids ready for school, and you got to pack their lunches and make breakfast, and then you got to take them to school. And it's not just school, because then you got to take them to other meetings and everything else and all the activities. Or maybe you're in school right now and you're trying to juggle school, but you also have to work because you need money. So I'm working, and you're going through school at the same time, and we just have so much on our plates. When do I, in my personal life, have time to behold the glory of the glory of God? Well, Willard, in that quote where he talks about keeping God before your mind, he says that this is a habit that we need to build. And habits are hard. Building a habit is hard. And if you're struggling with this, I'm not saying that, okay, tomorrow morning, I need you to start waking up early, 2 hours early every day, and spend, this amount of time doing this thing and that amount of time doing everything. That might not be in the cards for you right now. That'd be asking you to run a marathon without ever training. But with habits, start small. How can we find moments throughout the day to turn our attention to the glory of the Lord, to set our minds on the glory of the cross? I already finished this book, and I'm only a couple chapters into it, but I highly recommend it. Liturgy of the Ordinary by Tish Harrison Warren. It's a light read, it's quick, it's fun, but it's also very encouraging. And Tish Harrison Warren is actually an Anglican priest. And the way the book is laid out is fascinating because it just takes you through an everyday, ordinary day. And each chapter focuses on a different event of the day, like I'm waking up, I'm making my bed. Like there's a chapter on waking up. There's a chapter on making the bed. There's a chapter on brushing your teeth, fighting with your spouse, losing your keys, sending emails. But she connects each of these moments of our mundane lives to forms of Christian worship. And again, she's an Anglican priest, so she has some maybe different traditions than us. But this premise of finding God in the monotony of our lives is so encouraging to me. Our lives feel so ordinary so much of the time, doesn't it? But chaotic at the same time. We have all of these things that we're running to. I'm running from thing to thing, and maybe at the end of the day, if I get the kids in bed early enough, I could spend some time with the Lord. Or maybe I can get up a little early tomorrow. But you know what? That doesn't always work. For me, I go through seasons. There's times where I'm up every day early, and I'm hanging out with the Lord. But then weeks, sometimes months pass by, and I just can't get out of bed. And I miss my appointments with the Lord. And the thing is, if my gazing upon the glory of him is dependent on that, then I would just continue to grow in guilt and weariness. But that's the reality of our lives sometimes. Sometimes we miss these appointments. We find ourselves in these busy seasons where it's hard to carve out the time. But this book is encouraging because it's about finding Jesus Christ in the everyday chaos. That within the repetitive moments, every aspect of our life that's touched by God is an opportunity to connect with him. I got a couple quotes. When Jesus died for his people, he knew me by name in the particularity of this day. Christ didn't redeem my life theoretically or abstractly, the life I dreamed of living, or the life I think I should ideally be living. He knew I'd be in today as it is, in my home where it stands, in my relationships with their specific beauty and brokenness, in my particular sins and struggles. On this particular day, Jesus knows me and declares me his own. Jesus didn't die for a theoretical life, for the life that we wish we had. Jesus Christ died for this life, the life where I'm always running late, the life where my kids get sick, the life where I'm constantly tired, the life where I have to make dinner and do the dishes every day. That's the life that Jesus Christ died for. She goes on to say, God made us to spend our days in rest, work, and play, taking care of our bodies, our families, our neighborhoods, our homes. What if all these boring parts matter to God? What if days passed in ways that feel small and insignificant to us are weighty glory with meaning and part of the abundant life that God has for us? What if we can find the Lord's glory in everything we do, no matter how chaotic our life feels? And the point I'm trying to make here, as well as Tish Harrison Warren, as well as Dallas Willard, is building a habit out of contemplating the glory of the Lord can be hard. It can be challenging. Finding Jesus Christ in the monotony of everyday life, that's a conscious decision that we have to make. And I don't do it all the time. It's something that I have to build at, that I have to grow at. But you know what's even harder? Is a life where you're not. Building a life where we can find ways of gazing upon the glory of the Lord can be a challenge. But a life devoid of beholding his glory is impossible. We can't do it. Our souls yearn to contemplate the glory of the Lord. To deprive our souls of that is, again, to set ourselves up for failure and exhaustion. This is my final ask of us tonight. Won't we step out of this mode of our Christian walk where we think that is solely focused on the things that we have to do? Let's step back from the chaos and behold the glory of the Lord. Contemplate the miraculous fact that God's glory lives in your heart. Won't you spend time with him there in your heart? So sure, I don't know if it's going to snow tonight. If it does, you can curse me tomorrow morning as you're scraping off your car. Or maybe the Lord is calling on you to gaze upon his glory. Now, what I like to do, we've toying around with this the past couple of times we've met, but I'd like to do it a little bit more so tonight, is spend some time in prayer, in silent prayer. And then we're going to have Doug come back up for one more song. And I want you to, in this time of prayer, take to heart these questions and considerations about your soul. Are you tired? Are you burned out? Does your soul need cared for? What is the Lord telling you about your soul? And what is he saying to you? And what do you want to say in response? And again, if you're visiting here tonight and you don't know the Lord, I still encourage you to take this time to consider your heart. Are you tired too? Are you hurting? The Lord sees your hurt. He wants to speak to your heart and to your pain and your tiredness. And consider asking him to reveal himself to you and to your hurting heart. So I'm going to spend some time, 5 minutes, praying. And I encourage you to do the same. Thanks for entertaining that idea for me. Um, Figured it'd be a lighter group, so this would be a good time to try that. But if you heard something or anything you'd like to share, we'd like to hear about it afterwards. But Doug's going to come back up for one more song, one that I think that all of you are familiar with or should be familiar with. So